very complicated. And you can have, I mean, one of the complications that happens is that women often have an attached piece of the Y on their X chromosome. And so there's an idea that in the Olympics they could test whether you're a female by just testing whether you have any Y chromosome. But this is actually a really bad idea because a lot of women have tiny fragments of the Y, but it does nothing. And it may not even encode anything. That little piece of the Y has no effect. If you actually move that SRY gene, that has an effect. That masculinizes. In fact, you can turn, in other species, you can turn the X chromosome into Y by moving that piece onto it. Okay? All right, so there are a lot of different ways. So we talked about the XY system, which is what you find in humans and mammals, okay? And we talked about in Drosophila, you do something similar. But then you can have an XO system. And so some insects like grasshoppers use this, where actually there is no Y chromosome. So females are XX and males are X nothing, not. We just use a 0 for that, okay? And so they don't have a Y chromosome, and sex determination is based purely on the number of X chromosomes that they have, okay? It turns out that actually in flies, it's also the number of X chromosomes. For a long time, people thought it was the ratio of X chromosomes to autosomes, and more recent work suggested it's really just the number of X chromosomes. The Y chromosome does nothing but provide a few genes that the male needs to make normal sperm, okay? So you have the XY, XO. And then you actually have some animals where it's reversed. So birds are an example of this. So birds use what's called a ZW system, and it's similar to XY, only it's reversed in the sense that it's the males that are homogametic, so that have the same chromosome. So they're ZZ, and females are the ones that have the two different chromosomes. So in this case, they're ZW. Okay, so you see, it's just the flip side of the XY system, where now males are what we call the homogametic, and females are the heterogametic species. Okay, and then the one we did mention before, a haploid diploid system, which you see in bees, ants, and wasps, where eggs that are fertilized, okay, are diploid, and they develop as female, so they can be queens and workers and soldiers and so on. But if a queen lays an unfertilized egg, that's a haploid, and it develops as a male. And the males are relatively rare. They're the drones that go on and mate with other females. Okay, so if I ask you the question, if you have a male ant, okay, or a bee or anything, a male, okay, who's its father? No? So it has no father, okay? So it's a very odd situation. The males have no father, okay? Because they are produced by an unfertilized egg, and their entire genome is half from the mother, right? And they have nothing from a father. All right. And so both flies and humans use the XXXY. And in humans, we talked about the Y contains the SRY region that determines anatomical maleness. But in flies, you can get the situation, and this is one of the aberrations we'll talk about, right, where an animal ends up with just one X chromosome, okay, and nothing else. And it'll be a male. It'll be sterile because it's missing some of those genes from the Y that it needs to make sperm. But otherwise, anatomically, it'll be a male, okay? So in flies, it's the number of X chromosomes that sets the sex. And like I said, sometimes you'll still read in books that it's the ratio of X to autosomes, but it's really just the number of X chromosomes. How does this happen? How can you imagine that you end up losing a chromosome and you end up with an animal that's missing one chromosome? Anyone, any guesses? How you could get like an XO? Okay, right. So the answer was, well, maybe what happens is that the chromosomes don't actually separate like they're supposed to, right? And we'll go over this a little bit more. This is called non-disjunction. That, in fact, the segregation doesn't occur properly at one of the points when the chromosomes are supposed to be pulled apart. And so what you'll end up with, you can end up with a sperm or an egg that's missing a chromosome that you should have, right? Likewise, you could actually end up with an extra copy of a chromosome, okay? And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's how you can get mistakes like that. Yeah? Right, so in haploid diploid species, males can produce perfectly good sperm even though they're haploid. But they do it without the normal meiosis because they already are haploid. So they can take their cells and basically go through a process of just dividing them to make sperm. That's a good question, right? Because they don't need to undergo the normal process of meiosis anymore to do it. Right, there's no gene. So in male flies, the Y chromosome contains some of the genes required to make the sperm tail. Okay, but in haploid diploids, there's no sex chromosome. So those are all on chromosomes that are segregated, and so you end up with everything that you need. Yeah, that's right. And this is the kind of mysterious thing, is that you would think that, again, like I said, getting the sex ratio right is such an important thing. And usually, like big things in biology, you invent once and then you invented them a long time ago, and animals keep reusing them. But this is a weird situation where, in fact, animals keep reinventing ways to do sex determination. And we're going to talk now about a couple more ways, okay? So there also can be non-genetic mechanisms for sex determination, okay? And so, for example, as one of the students already said, right, that temperature actually can do it, okay, in a few animals. So in alligators and many turtles, it's actually a temperature-based system, okay? So, for example, in painted turtles, okay, they're developing eggs, right? And at a critical period, if the eggs are cool, they become males. And if they're warm, they become females, okay? So it's a temperature-dependent process instead. Okay? And in alligators, it's also temperature dependent, but it works the other way. And we know that in alligators, the critical period is between 7 and 21 days when the egg is developing. And in this case, warm temperatures lead to males, and warm is greater than 34, and cool temperatures lead to females, so less than 30. Okay? And the reason that they're so warm is this is a female alligator, and she's built a nest out of rotting vegetation, and she's got the eggs in there, and she's protecting them, and she sits on the nest a lot of the time. She keeps it warm. Okay? And depending on what temperature she keeps it, will control the ratio of males and females that she gets. Okay? So in fact, there's a lot of concern that as there's global temperature climate change, this is going to mess up a lot of animals. Okay? Because if the average temperature starts rising, for example, in the case of alligators, what you're going to end up with is more and more males and fewer females. Okay? So this is a temperature-dependent system. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that she consciously knows that, okay? But there is a lot of interesting work about what other factors in the environment and competition between animals would influence this. But yeah, I don't know that it's that well worked out. But it is an interesting mechanism of doing it. And it means that you can have variable ratios of males and females in, depending on obviously on the temperature. Okay. Other mechanisms that are at work, so in fish also have, yeah. Okay, so that's what you're going to get at the very end, okay? So hold on, or that's what I'm going to ask you at the very end, okay? All right, so there's some other examples. So clownfish, right? They're all born males, okay? But the dominant individual becomes a female, and the others stay a male. So sometimes if any of you dive and you photograph clownfish, sometimes you'll notice that there's 3 clownfish living on an anemone. 2 larger ones, which are the male and female, and then a little one, okay? And that little one is a small male. And if one of the larger ones dies, he'll take that. What he'll do is he'll become one of those breeding individuals, but if he's the dominant one, he'll become the female. If he ends up being the less dominant one, he's going to stay a male, okay? And so this keeps just a couple breeding pairs in a population at a time. It has to do with aggressiveness. So whoever is more aggressive and wins out, they sort of battle each other a little bit. And so it has to do with the stress that they undergo. Okay? But you can get other fish which goes the other way. The dominant, the more aggressive individual in the population becomes the male, and the other stay the female. Okay? So you can have a male with a harem of females. That male dies, then whichever is the next dominant female will become the male. Okay? And so you can get pretty complicated situations. Yeah. So the sex isn't determined genetically. And so it has to do with hormone balances in the animal, and then it will start to develop its organs as male or female to fit that. And there are even fish that can switch. I mean, like this can switch, but if any of you raise fish called swordtails, you can get females that have lived quite a while and been reproductive and had eggs, and then they'll become super males. They'll become males, and they'll become fully fertile males. They'll end up forming testes and sperm and everything, and they'll be fine. So they can reprogram the organs. Okay, so it's clear, though, that some organisms can reproduce without sex, or they can alternate between having and not having sex. So think back to that tree example we gave you of that grove of aspen that I said was actually one giant organism, because it had reproduced just by running root runners, okay? Having more and more trees, they could be separated, would be separate trees. It could also reproduce by a normal sexual mode, okay? And so you find many organisms can reproduce either way, okay? And it often depends on the environment, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. But in general, when things look bad, right, when the world is like not so good, animals often then have sex, okay? And we'll talk about why this is, why sex is a last-ditch effort to keep from your species going extinct sometimes. Okay, but you also have an unusual mode of what we call virgin birth, okay? And we call this parthenogenesis, where there's just one parent, and the parent is going to be a female, okay? And we'll give two examples and see if you can figure out how this might work, okay? And the two examples, and there's many examples of this now in the animal kingdom. We'll give you two examples, one with something called the whiptail lizard and the other thing called the Komodo dragon. Has anyone ever heard of these animals? Okay, a couple of you, right? All right, so this is the whiptail lizard, the New Mexico whiptail lizard. It's this particular species. And it turns out they're all female. There are no males in this species of lizard, okay? But they do this, right? They're engaging in mating behavior, okay? But they're all females, okay? And they need this to actually stimulate them to actually produce the eggs, okay? So they go through this ritual, even though there are no males, okay? And then their eggs start to develop. And their eggs will actually turn into juvenile animals, and they'll be females, of course, all right? Because it's an all-female species. And what happens is the genome of the offspring, okay, are identical to mom, okay? All of her progeny, if you have any individual whiptail lizard, and you collect lots of offspring from her, her offspring are all genetically identical to her. So let's just imagine, let's go back to this sort of make-believe, being able to do, do some PCR and amplify out some markers, okay? And again, they're just random markers, okay? But they act as, these alleles that we can follow. And so mom was this, right? So she's homozygous at this one, and then she's heterozygous here, heterozygous there for these particular size markers. And her offspring are all absolutely identical to her, okay? So how could this happen? Okay, so let's throw out some guesses. How could you do that? So here's the, just to remind you, here's the regular process of mitosis, the regular process of meiosis. How could I get an animal that was a clone of its mom? Okay, so that's a good possibility. One is that actually it's just a process of mitosis, that all she does is her eggs are actually just a cell division from a normal somatic cell, okay? So it turns out that would be possible, but it's not the answer, because she does undergo meiosis, okay? And she does make eggs through a process of meiosis, okay? So you have to look on the right-hand side, okay? And think about, well, how could I get something through this process that was identical to the starting somatic cell? Okay, a little louder. Okay, so if I didn't have any crossing over, right, I might be able to do it. The problem is if I don't have any crossing over, okay, then one of the problems I get is I still get random assortment of the chromosomes. Okay, well, that gets complicated. How would you imagine that you won't get independent assortment? Because, right, so they don't really know. But it's the right idea, because the point is you've got to keep it exactly identical. You can't do something like just have these fuse together, right? Because then they wouldn't be identical to the starting cell, okay? Because there'd be crossovers happening, and then if those fuse, they wouldn't actually be identical to mom. So what happens is a little complicated, right? So here's, again, the normal process of meiosis. What happens in whiptail lizards is they undergo one extra round. They undergo a round of DNA replication before they start meiosis, okay? And then what happens is actually, instead of getting homologs paired up like this, right, now they pair up this way. There's an extra copy. Those identical copies pair up. They actually do undergo recombination, but they're two identical copies, so nothing changes when they do that. And then those pairs separate and segregate, okay? But now the offspring's actually inherited, essentially faithfully from mom, a copy of her genome, okay? And so then these form. Okay, so now you have the four products of meiosis look like this. They actually look identical to one another, okay? Because there weren't actually homologs paired up, okay? And so when recombination occurred, you didn't get this mixing and matching of alleles like you would expect. All right, so you have those four products. And one of the things we haven't told you is, well, what really happens to the four products of meiosis? So in a lot of animals, what happens is that they form things called polar bodies. So this is an oocyte, and each time that it divided, right, only one of them was on the line to actually forming the real oocyte. So this forms something called the polar body, okay, which buds off. And that polar body divides and gives rise to these two. And then when this one divides, there's one more polar body. Well, it's possible for those two to fuse together, okay? And that would get you back to being a diploid, okay? But now because all of your products of meiosis are the same in that group, then it returns you back to the exact same genome as mom. Okay, so I think you'll follow it along for yourself, and you'll see that this is the outcome of this. And this is how the whiptail lizards reproduce, right? They undergo this one extra DNA synthesis round before meiosis, okay? And then they can have this altered pattern of meiosis, so they can form perfect clones of themselves. Okay, and this is the other example we'll end with, okay? So these are Komodo dragons, okay? And you really shouldn't do this to Komodo dragons, right? They're actually pretty nasty animals. They hunt animals much larger than themselves, and the way they do it, so it's hunting a water buffalo here, it'll bite the water buffalo. It has a venom in its mouth as well, as its mouth is full of very nasty bacteria, and it'll put a gash in the leg of this animal. It won't actually be that serious, but both the venom and the bacteria will take its toll, and after about a week, the Komodo will just wait and follow this injured animal around, and after a week, it'll be weak enough that a bunch of Komodos can then attack it and bring it down, okay? And that's how they hunt. And they will hunt people too, okay? They're pretty nasty animals. Okay, so Komodo dragons, they can reproduce by female-male mating, and that's their normal way of reproduction. But sometimes a Komodo dragon lays an egg even though there's no male that it's mated with, okay? And so this is known for sure because sometimes they're in zoos and there's only a female Komodo dragon. And the babies that she produces, right, are not genetically identical to her, okay? And they're not even identical to each other, all right? So from one female. but instead they have 50% of her alleles, and they're now homozygous at every locus. Okay? So this is the pattern that you would get, which again, make-believe set of alleles. So if this was mom, then her parthenogenic offspring might look like this. And this is just one of them. Okay? So it would be homozygous at every locus, and it'd be using any place that mom is heterozygous, it would end up with just one or another. But if she gave rise to another parthenogenic offspring, it may not be like this one. It may be 181, 181, 104, 104, 207, 207, something like that. Okay? So how does that happen? Okay? So just to make sure that we get done here, I'll just tell you. So what happens in Komodo dragons is that they can actually go ahead and take one of these haploid products, okay, regular meiosis, and they can just cause it undergo a round of replication without cell division. So they can take one of these haploid oocytes, and they can get the chromosome, if there are no males around, every now and then this will happen, and that haploid will become a diploid, okay? And so we're showing that chromosome having undergone the recombination. So do you understand what happens now? So it only has 50% of the variation that mom had. It's now homozygous at any locus, and no two are going to be the same as each other, okay? So that's how it happens in Komodo dragons. So that's just to illustrate that, again, these very odd things can happen, but if you understand the biology, you can understand what's going to happen. So I'm going to leave you with this question, okay, that we'll start with next time, which is, if organisms can reproduce asexually, why have sex?